AVST live webinar on Skype for Business, voicemail options. We have Neil Butler, our Director of Sales Engineering, who's going to walk us through the content today. Just want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us, and before I turn it over to Neil, I will let you know that we will have plenty of time for Q&A, and you're welcome to type your question in at any time. If you have the panel minimized, use the orange arrow in the upper right corner. And the slides also will be available. I'm actually going to, it looks like I didn't load them in the handouts area. I will do that during the session here, and then we will also send the slides out to you via email once we conclude. And in addition, we are recording, so if you want to go back and review or send it to someone in your office who missed it or someone else you think might be interested, that's certainly an option. So with that, I will turn it over to Neil.
Thank you, Ann. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is a fun one to do. We spend a lot of our time, and those of you that attend our webinars regular, protesting we're not primarily a voicemail company because we do so much more. But now we're going to kind of go in the opposite direction and talk about a place where we do voicemail, and it is very important that we can do it. And it's kind of interesting to think about. We've been doing voicemail since we were founded years and years ago. I don't know how many users, the 20 million users number just gets updated kind of, it looks like randomly every now and then. I think we're quite a bit above that actually. It just has to do with our timing in the market was pretty solid. We were one of the earliest players in the industry standard hardware software version of this kind of unified communications app, which means we've been able to keep our product growing and being developed and improved for 30 years or so. So we're pretty familiar with talking about voicemail. We've been providing voicemail products for a long time. But we've also been providing unified communications solutions that go far beyond voicemail. And as we look at where we're going to spend our R&D dollars and focus our business, we've learned that the unified communications is a very, very broad category, but beyond just that, it's different depending on who you are within the enterprise. Individual workers, and particularly mobile workers, have one set of needs. Teams have a completely different set of needs, and businesses kind of are the core answering and call processing part of the business. So we need to look at all times at how we kind of support all of those people. And if you look at why our customers buy our product, and we do go back and talk to customers, both ones we've won and lost, a good part of it is still replacing the old mission-critical voicemail automated attendant piece. And we're happy to do that. We're well positioned to do that. But at the same time, it's a rare customer that we talk with that even though they're replacing their 20-year-old Octel system, don't have a half a dozen projects also going on looking forward in terms of unified communications. Unified communications has sort of come to that point where it isn't just an option you're going to look at. It's something most people know they have to do in several areas. And so we spend a lot of time making sure that what people are interested in today, we have that value in our product. So certainly unified messaging we've been doing, the mobility piece with our personal assistant, speech enablement, all of that is a key piece of what we do. And while we're doing all that, we're also looking forward a few years. And fortunately, we were looking forward a few years, about 5 years ago, and watching that pesky Microsoft product, Office Communicator Link Skype, and kind of getting an idea where they were going. And we were very comfortable that they were going to be a big part of the communications industry moving forward. And there's a lot of ways you can tell that with Microsoft, but it's become pretty apparent in how they're positioning that product and what they're doing, that's a big part of their future. So now we take our platform that's been out there doing voicemail for all these years, and we wonder, well, does that move forward in the UC market? And we were really blessed in the early days that our founders were data people. And the platform they built was built from scratch to be a multi-application platform. And it was a true 3-tier business model, meaning there was a core server engine with application modules on top and connectivity connectors that brought in the various pieces we needed to connect to. And that architecture has really given us an advantage as we go forward in the market. So as we move into the new world, where all of a sudden, the partner names are different than they were 10 years ago, we're just in a perfect position to do that. And things like getting Microsoft certification for us is just a natural. We've run on Microsoft servers for years now. We use their technology for a lot of things that we do within the product. So we've actually kind of hold a slightly, not quite unique, but very limited certification set of both being gold in communications and in messaging. And communications and messaging, that's kind of the core of unified communications. And we believe that the time we've spent not just learning the Microsoft products, but spent looking at the world in terms of how it's connecting in a Microsoft environment has given us the ability to offer what we're offering today, which is a unique solution. And like I say, it's a rare customer we don't talk to that isn't looking at UC opportunities of one type or another. And I would say it's almost as rare to have somebody that's not talking about Skype for Business. Now that doesn't mean, we talk to a lot of people that say, yeah, next year I'm going to take my phone system out and move to Skype. But it's a pretty typical discussion that they're either thinking about doing a trial, maybe a new branch on Skype, looking 3 or 4 years out with the concept that probably the technology will change to something along those lines, and just kind of positioning within the enterprise how that's going to look. And so you want to be able to have conversations with those people around our products. And if you're the customer themselves, then you definitely want to look at what we do to enhance Skype. And we have a whole series of webinars that we're doing right now because we looked at Skype a few years ago, and with our years of experience in the communications industry said, wow, here are the things they're doing great. Here's some stumbling blocks for them, and let's see if we can't fix those. And that's what we've been working on. As we look at customers out there, very few are looking at a rip and replace strategy. Like I say, some might put a new office in. They open up a new branch in a city. They might start Skype there. Some might talk about Skype for Business, the telephony component, to be deployed for remote offices or remote users. But it's still a fairly cautious migration path. But that doesn't mean that they aren't looking. And as a customer, if you're looking, there's some answers you probably need to have fairly soon to make that go forward. So if you go back, I don't know, 2.5 years ago, we went to Microsoft and said, so we're looking at what at the time was Link coming out and what you're doing in terms of the enterprise telephony piece of it, enterprise voice piece of it. And there are some things in the market we think that you might have issues with, and here they are. And we just want to let you know that we actually can help you with that. And they did the very typical Microsoft thing of saying, okay, they're unendingly polite, and but they were pretty comfortable that the market would simply follow them where they went. So, and they've been very successful at that, by the way, in a lot of areas. So we continued working on an integration, and then about 1.5 years later, they actually came back to us and said, it turns out there's quite a few millions of dollars of business sitting at our door we can't bring in because of those issues you talked about. So tell us again, what is it that you can do? And so now we're in a unique position that there are things we can do in a Skype for Business deployment that besides the core Microsoft product itself, Exchange UM and the Exchange Automated Attendant, no one else can do. And as a result, while they don't publicly endorse us, they do definitely steer business our way when they run into some of the bumps that we're going to talk about. So that's really how our position has gotten to be somewhat unique in this market. If you're looking at Skype, it could be that a pure Skype for Business deployment will work fine for you. But more than likely, like most customers, there will be some things that you consider not quite the right way, not quite the way you're doing things today. And part of it starts with, in an environment, those earlier slides said, very few people are going to tear everything out at once. So the ability to tie things together and maintain business without, if you go out to a couple of your remote offices and put Skype for Business in, you really don't want to create a technology island, where because of what you're using out there, your employees can't communicate very well. So one of the things that we find is very helpful with our product is while we can support Skype for Business uniquely, we also can support everything else. So whether you have TDM, current TDM equipment of Avaya and Cisco, older TDM equipment, no matter what you have, you basically can use us to start tying that enterprise together as you start looking at deploying Skype for Business. Now what we're really doing here is really pretty simple to understand. If you look at Skype for Business, when it's deployed as a full Microsoft solution, the voicemail and call processing front end, like the automated attendant, is provided by an expansion module on Exchange called Exchange Unified Messaging. Now Exchange Unified Messaging is nothing new. It's been in the market 5 or 6 years and really didn't see much from a competitive point for them. There's a few things that it does that create problems in an enterprise. So when Skype for Business wasn't involved, it typically wasn't a very popular solution. But now Skype for Business comes along and customers are very interested in that, but they get so far down the road and they start running into these same stumbling points, and now there's an alternative. So you still, as a customer, of course, would deploy Exchange, but instead of Exchange Unified Messaging, our server would take the place of just that functionality. They're still going to do all the email and the presence and all that stuff they do so well, but when it comes to voice messaging and call processing, we're going to be able to step in. And the reason we can step in so effectively is our product's been forged in the heat of battle for 30 years. We know what the customers need and want because that's what's guided our product development. So all these things that are problems in a pure Exchange environment are not problems for us. The biggest one is voicemail confidentiality. And this could be confidentiality and compliance. And the concept here is, and we've for years been selling the concept of unified messaging, and a good portion of our customers would say, I am not willing to put my voice messages into my email, and because they can get out of the system. So if you think of something like the HIPAA requirement in healthcare, where any information that has to do with the patients, you just cannot let it get out of your control. Well, if you put a voice message that has patient information into Exchange, it's just very easy for the users to even inadvertently forward that message off, and it gets out of the ecosystem. So the one major important thing that Exchange can't do is store messages anywhere else except in Exchange. So one of the big early flags for Microsoft is when a customer pushes back and says, yeah, we have a problem with that, then we get a knock on our door to come in, whether it's directly first to talk to the customer or through our wonderful channel of VARs and dealers. Somebody gets to go in and have the conversation that we can solve that. And the reason we can solve that is because we've been in the unified messaging market since it started, and we've had all these conversations with customers. We were the first unified messaging product on the market. I can't remember now whether it was 1989 or 1991, quite a long time ago. And basically, we've been developing and deploying that department, or that application, along with customer needs and wishes. So now we have a very wide array of methods of deploying unified messaging. Now, the one that causes some of the headaches is also the one that is very, very feature-rich, called server-based unified messaging. And that just means the messages get unified at a server level, which is a fancy way of saying you're going to store your voice messages in your email system. They are now literally email messages, and they are simply WAV file attachments to an email. You get them from any email client. In the Exchange world, if you're using Outlook Web Access, you get them. If you're using cached mode, when you disconnect your laptop from the network, now you have your voice messages along with your email. If you're pushing them out using Exchange ActiveSync to your mobile devices, now all your voice messages get pushed out. It's a very easy deployment in terms of once you put it in, it just rides the back of your email infrastructure. So all that money you spent developing and deploying that to your users, now take advantage of this solution. The only real downside is it does put messages into the Exchange message store. And there are people that have a problem with that. Now, from our point of view, on a user-by-user basis, we can employ this and store the messages there, or not store it and choose one of the other methods we're going to look at, which means, let's say in a HIPAA scenario, the IT staff, administrators, people who would not have any access or anything in their mailbox that had patient information in it could go ahead and use this method for the full productivity gain, while other people who had more like daily contact with patients, they would use one of the other methods, and we'll look at those as we go through these slides. The interesting thing about server-based unified messaging is it's undergoing a pretty big change these days, and that is email, groupware, is sliding out into the cloud at a pretty regular rate. It started a little slow 4 or 5 years ago when bandwidth was almost there and people were starting to dabble with it. But now, once again, a large number of the customers we talk to, if they are a Microsoft Exchange shop, are looking at going to Office 365. And we're not going to go through the reasons for that in this, the whole CapEx versus OpEx billing and all of those issues. But once a customer has decided to do that, well, it's critical from our point of view to support that. So from the perspective of going to Office 365, there is no change in what we offer as compared to an on-site exchange. Basically, you go out to Office 365, we offer all these same options we're going to talk about. We pretty much offer all those same options in a Gmail hosted environment as well. So for us, hosted is more of what protocols we use, what communications tools we use to communicate with that server out in the cloud, because those are a little bit different. I mean, the core is Exchange Web Services, but the way you get there is a little bit different. So I can now have users that are using Office 365. In a migration environment, I can have users that are using Exchange, and in that same building, I can have some other users who have already started the migration and are using Office 365. In fact, we can support as many different email environments as the company has, and that includes someone who's on Lotus moving to Exchange, somebody who's got some users on Gmail, some users on Exchange, and now they're looking at moving some of them to Office 365, 3 exchanges on separate domains. Any way that you lay it out in your infrastructure, we can support that. Early on, for people who didn't want messages to be stored on their email servers, and most of that in the early days was more about size contention. You know, voice messages were big way back then compared to the text of emails. Well, now, of course, if you go to your email and click the little attachment button, then all your attachments come to the top, and you look at what you have in your mailbox, you know, average attachment size is very, very large. You've got documents and videos and all sorts of things. Our average message size is probably 250K. So that's not that big of an issue anymore. So this method is not as popular. What we do here is we leave the messages on the CX system, but you go into any IMAP for client, but certainly you can do it with Outlook, and create another connection to us as if we're another IMAP message store. And now you have one inbox for voicemail, one inbox for email. One of the issues with this today is you can, based on how the email clients work, drag one of the messages from our inbox, which is stored on CX, over into, let's say, the inbox or even a folder on your email system, and that message actually gets moved from CX over to Exchange. So there's still that confidentiality and compliance issue where it's a problem. So this is probably the least popular method of deploying unified messaging today. One of the ones that we find is very popular, and this is one that gets used kind of in that split deployment, is for people with confidentiality issues, we deploy what we call secure unified messaging, which is just a fancy way of saying web-based messaging. So we have a client, our own client, the phone manager client, that will let a user from a graphical interface look at the messages that are on the CX system. They are not in the email server. And they can basically do everything they can do over the phone, although it's easier because it's graphical. So what I mean by that is they can listen to that message, they can play it over the speakers on their PC, play it over their telephones, the telephone will ring and play it. They can forward that message to other users, they can save that message, they can delete that message. What they can't do is get that message out of the system. There's no file attachment save, there's no cache copy that a smart user can go down and dig out a copy of that message. So in terms of something like HIPAA compliance, where due diligence and intent count for a lot, you can easily say this is no different than a phone access that everybody in the world has to voicemail. So this is a very popular one. Two other things make it very popular. It's the easiest to deploy because basically we give your IT staff, a DVD with our application. They put it on your web server. We don't require a new web server to be deployed. This will run on Apache. This will run on IIS, pretty much anything that supports PHP. So very easy to deploy. No desktop touch. Once that application goes in, it's there, and it's very intuitive. And it's not just for messaging. That client also does things like lets users reset their passwords if they've forgotten them, or maintain their distribution lists from a more friendly graphical interface. So that's one of the reasons it's popular. The other one is there's no charge for it. The other versions where we're using email clients have a small charge per user. This one does not. So this can be deployed within your enterprise at no cost other than the labor to get it out and deploy it. Now, even this, for some people, is more than they want to do. So we have the last version, which is basically called Simplified Unified Messaging. And this is really notification. Now, it might be a little more, but it starts in the base as our system, by default, as a standard feature. When you get a voicemail, can be configured to send an email to up to 2 addresses. and tell you have an email. And the template we use to create that can tell you, here's a new email, here's who it's from, here's how many messages you have in your inbox. All of that can be designed and set up. And it's simple SMTP mail delivery. As an option, a user can be programmed to also, with that email, receive a copy of the voicemail message. So now you have two messages. You have one that's stored on our system and one that's an email. They are separate. They have to be managed separately. You have to delete both of them. They don't try and sync back up. But it's very easy to deploy. Once again, there's no charge for this. And this is a very interesting application tool. Maybe you bring 50 contractors on board for a 6-month engagement. You're not really going to put them on your in-house Exchange system or Office 365, but you can still put them on your voicemail and have a way to get their messages out to whatever their email address is. So simplified unified messaging, also no charge. So in the area of concern about confidentiality and compliance being equal to confidentiality, you've all had discussions within your organizations about e-document discovery and retention and what that means, and a lot of people have expressed a strong desire to not put anything more into that email than they have to. And so this is how we now can sit down with a customer and say, for your different types of users, you now can deploy unified messaging any method you want. The problem with Exchange is it is a single message store product. Every user stores all their voice messages in Exchange, and there's no way around that. And that's the biggest reason that Microsoft is likely to bring us in the door. But there's a lot of other things that we do that make us kind of a nice addition to a Skype deployment. And we're not going to go through all of our features. We have webinars for almost all these features. And now that we've captured your name for this one, you can count on hearing from us on all these. But one of the things is our speech interface. Our user speech interface is very tightly integrated into the Microsoft world. So it's a great speech rec interface. It's been around for years. One of the things about our company is almost none of this technology we're talking about is new, first or second generation. Our speech product's almost 15 years old, and we've been growing it and tuning it up and benefiting from customer feedback over that entire time. Our speech interface is complete, meaning you can climb in your car and hit your Bluetooth button, log in, have your email messages read to you, listen to your voicemail messages, read your calendar, call a coworker, call someone in your contacts, call by speaking the number, create a new meeting in your calendar, change the status of your system. All of that information with a very easy to use speech interface. So from a productivity point of view, that's another advantage we have. Yes, there is Outlook Voice Access, which is the Microsoft Exchange version of this that does many of the same things. What they lack is 10 years in terms of getting it to work effectively and easily. The other issue that came up after we started, and this wasn't one that Microsoft was particularly worried about, but what happens in a lot of enterprise deals is voicemail is not that important anymore. Voicemail is not a major it's something we have to have. We understand that, but they just don't want to spend a lot of money and time. A lot of these simply moving to this new version, they have to capture what they had before. So the thought of retraining 10,000 users for a new set of DTMF commands, the push button commands when you're on the phone, and these Octel people and some of these other people have been using those commands for years, 10, 15, 20 years. The thought of retraining them is frightening in terms of how hard it is to do. And it's something that many customers have come to us and said, we can't afford the disruption to the business that would cause. Not just the time lost figuring out how to do it, but the simple things like, oh, I pushed those old keys again, and now I deleted all my messages. And that's a problem. So to solve that problem, what we've been doing over the years, because once again, we've been doing legacy voicemail replacements for a long time, is we have built telephone user interface emulations. And these are mapping to the keystrokes that the old systems use. And you'll see a lot of our competitors talk about how they do this, but very few of them really do it well. They kind of do a top-level mapping. Yeah, you can still press this key to get to messages. But when you get down a couple of keystrokes, it's different. This is only valuable if it's accurate enough that you don't have to retrain your users. And ours are that accurate. And we're happy to send out our documentation on these. So if you're an ARIA or a Serenade user and you want to see what it would be like to use our interface, we will gladly send you the document. There's two documents. There's our user guide, but we also have a side-by-side keystroke comparison, so you can see. There's a few areas with slight differences. Certainly setting up mailbox options is different because we have so many more options in these old systems. We couldn't use their sort of flat key map to do it. But this is another piece where in an environment where somebody's looking at moving from a TDM traditional environment to Skype for Business, this is a barrier to entry. Not the most serious one for sure, but definitely one that will come up. So if you look at what we do, it's all about enhancing Skype. We're not competing with Skype. Skype's really, in this case, Skype for Business is more of a phone system than it is anything else. I guess we're competing with Exchange that part of it at least. But the things we do in this come directly from our experience in the business. So the migration piece comes from the fact that for 20 years, people have been consolidating their infrastructure, buying new companies with different types of phone systems. All of that change has led us to build a product that's flexible. We talked in this presentation about the voicemail. There are issues in voicemail that will stumble and stall a Skype implementation. And like I said, that's when Microsoft brings us in, but there's a lot of other great things we do. We have a couple of other presentations coming up. One is on the call processing portion. A lot of people will say, well, call processing is not really that important coming in. We don't do that much of it, but you'll be surprised when the time comes to move the systems at how much business process is still embedded in some of those old legacy systems. We also have a mobility piece that we can talk about. It's kind of interesting, but our mobility client is actually better integrated into the Microsoft environment than theirs is. They don't really have the equivalent kind of client. They have Link, the mobile Link client that does the link and the presence and some of those things. But what we do with mobility, particularly with incoming call management, very powerful. And we do it in the Microsoft environment. We read the calendar to know how to route calls. We read their link status to know how to route calls. We read their physical location to know how to route calls. So we have a very powerful solution there. And then the call center piece, we have something. One of the things that as you start dealing with Skype for Business, you're going to run across is response groups. Response groups are very interesting. They're kind of a cross between a hunt group and a not so powerful call center app. And they do a couple of things that are very interesting, but they seem to fail to be able to replace the existing functionality going on in an enterprise in terms of that group call routing. So we're not a call center. You're not going to buy our solution to replace, that 500-seat call center you have. But for small informal work groups, the kind that are likely to use response groups, we offer some pretty interesting additional capabilities, all based, in this case, on making the transition from a traditional TDM environment over to Skype for Business. We're spending a lot of time, a lot of money, making sure that we take all this knowledge we've had in the traditional market over the years and position it such that it can help those people that are looking at moving into the new unified communications market with all its different ways of doing things, so many of them which are great. So much about what goes on is giving customers more and more functionality and control, but a lot of it is also about making sure you don't lose along the way those pieces, the traditional pieces that are still important to your business. And with that, perhaps we'll take some questions.
Great idea, Neil. We do have some questions coming in. I'll just direct you, if you have a question or you think of something during the Q&A that you have not already submitted, go ahead and use the orange arrow in the upper corner to expand the panel, and you should see the question box down at the bottom. And I will also let you know the slides are available in the handouts area as well if you'd like those, and we will send those out via email once we conclude later today. First question, Neil, can some users have voicemail on Exchange and others a separate store on AVST?
Yeah, we've looked at doing that, but what you end up with are those technology islands where it's not too easy to communicate between the two of those. That actually, in the early days, was Microsoft's answer. If you're moving from a traditional system over and not all your users can go on Exchange, they would actually tell the users to keep their old voicemail there. It works. You still have messaging, but it's not kind of the best solution. Once you put our solution in place, you have what you need. If you want to put Exchange, then use us to do that instead.
Okay. Next question. Actually, I see two questions in here that are almost asking the same thing, so I'll ask both of them together. What is the secure web-based AVST component called Phone Manager? And the other question is, what prevents forwarding of voicemail?
Okay, so there's a bunch of different pieces all tied together there, all about the same kind of concept. So our application is called Web Phone Manager, and it's just a web application we built. And it started for users. You know, as our solution got more feature-rich, while our telephone-based interface will let you do things like add people to your personal distribution list, change your message notification numbers, all of that, it's kind of complex. And if you don't do it very often, you know, you're going to fall into that 80-20 thing where you just don't use 80% of the features because it's more time and trouble to figure it out, you know, that twice a year you want to do it. So we built this graphical client that lets a user maintain their system. And it's going to run on a customer's web server. It's going to go out through HTMLS, so it's secure. And basically, we added to that a messaging component. So now from that same client, you can play your messages over the phone, over the speakers, forward them, etc. Now, the whole question about forwarding voicemail gets split into a couple of sections depending on how you're accessing it. So if you start with the phone, from the phone, if I listen to a voicemail, I can forward it to any user on my system. That's just a basic feature where I hit a button to forward it, or I say forward, say the user's name, and that message will be forwarded. With Web Phone Manager, that's the same set of capabilities we have. So I can basically go in, and from the Web Phone Manager client, I can forward any message I have to any user on my system. But even though it's a graphical client, I can't forward it anywhere else. I can't forward it to an email address. I can't go file, attachment, save. It really is a duplicate in terms of functionality of the telephone interface. Now, if I take that message and I put it into Exchange, now I have all these different options that we talk about. If I don't do anything, I just give somebody server-based and they have a voice message in Exchange, well, basically they can forward it to anyone they want. It's an email message. If they know somebody's email address, they can say forward, and that copy of the voice message goes, and that might be a good thing or that might be a bad thing. Now, we can mark messages as private. You know, we can set it up so that a user can make messages private. Within our system, that means they can't forward it. So if I send Ann a message and I mark it private, she can listen to it, but she can't forward it anywhere. But if I put that message into Exchange, although that private tag carries forward, Exchange or Outlook will ignore it. It'll show it's private, but it'll still let you send it anywhere. So that's not very private. So as another option, we have private message restriction, which says, in the case of any message put into Exchange that's marked as private, we won't actually put the message there. We'll send an email and say, hey, you have a private message. How you get to it is call into the phone and listen to it. Well, because we can't control what Exchange can do or not do in terms of forwarding, but we can make it so that that message doesn't get out of the system. So all those options are available in terms of message privacy.
Oh, sorry, I had my phone on mute there. Thanks, Neil. Next question, which type of is most popular?
Yeah, that's really a moving target. So for years, client-based was. One, client-based didn't require the telephony department dealing with the data department. And years ago, those departments were not in harmony, let's just say. And when we started looking at doing server-based and we were talking to the data people, the size of the messages was still a problem, so client-based was popular. But over the years, server-based became the most popular. Basically, it's the most feature-rich. It did the best job. But then you go back 10 years in business, and all of a sudden there's these concerns, Sarbanes-Oxley, confidentiality, HIPAA, all these things that putting a message into an email have an impact that goes beyond functionality. I actually talk to compliance officers from customers on a fairly regular basis. You know, they're the ones that decide what can happen in terms of that kind of concept. So I would say today, an average customer probably splits between server-based and web-based, the secure version. Now, a lot of customers go full web, and we still have some customers that go full Exchange, putting in server-based. But I'd say the average customer, there's probably a split there.
Okay, next question. If I already have a Call Express on a legacy PBX, can I add the Skype integration on the same system?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that we were really lucky, we really did our homework there, and it took us 1.5 years to figure out how to do this, but we've been able to integrate in such a way that from a CX or Call Express point of view, it's just another SIP integration. That's exactly what it looks like. So you buy it and license it the same exact way. So if you have any kind of integration on a CX Now, you can simply go to your dealer and say, give me the Skype for Business integration with 12 ports. They'll give you a price. The technician comes out, adds that integration, does the configuration on their side. The link person builds the trusted application, and you're in business. So if you think of it as just another SIP integration, there's one thing that is different. Not that it has to do with how you would configure it, but one of the things Microsoft has not yet opened up is message waiting control on the Skype for Business piece. In other words, we can't light message waiting lights on telephones. We can do it, but it's just totally blocked right now by Microsoft.
Okay, thanks very much, Neil. It actually looks like that wraps up the questions. If any float in here, we'll certainly take those offline and follow up with the individual who asked. And I will also let you know that if you have a question later that you think of, or maybe after you review the slides that we send out, you can always email us at info@avst.com. And in addition, we do have a Skype for Business resource page on our website, so you can find that. And I will also send that in our follow-up. But that's avst.com/Skype for Business if you're looking for some additional information in the meantime. And again, we just want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. Neil mentioned we have upcoming webinars. There's actually another Skype for Business webinar coming up next week, which will focus on auto attendant and IVR. And each of you will receive an invite to that session as well. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Neil, you want to close us up?
Sure. I'd just like to also thank everybody. We know it's hard for you to carve time out of your day to come to these. Hopefully you find them useful. And if not, you should let us know that. That info@AVST, you can say good things and bad things. We're happy to hear both. Well, we're happy to hear good things. But if these aren't hitting the spot, we certainly want to know that, because this is one of the best ways to get this kind of first pass information out. There's so much in your world, so many people knocking on your door, so much everybody wants you to know, that a nice little short webinar that kind of says, dig in deep enough to know if this is what you really need, and then if it is, pursue it, and if not, then you can move on. So let us know how we're doing in that. And that's all I have.
All right. Thanks, Neil. Have a great day, everyone.
To learn more about AVST, please visit www.avst.com.